back. Our co-hosts on this terrific Tuesday, the Admiral, Bill Stubblefield. Bill, happy April Fool's Day to you.
Happy April Fool's to you as well, Ron. And I'm surprised you have not attempted an April Fool gag on me this morning, but you have not. You've been very upfront.
Oh, the day's not over yet, April.
It can always happen. In other words, keep looking over my shoulder. Be leery, be aware, be conscious. Who knows what's going to happen? I've said enough, Matt.
He's nervous. I think he's nervous over there.
He is.
Hall of Famer Matt Miller. Good morning, Matty.
I share very quickly my greatest April Fool's Day memory. Not any prank that anyone played on us, but go back to 2021, right in the heart of everything COVID. The high school basketball season has all been shifted around, and on Thursday, April 1st, Martinsburg, in a last-minute get-together game because of COVID situations with opponents, went to Bridgeport. And on the drive back from Bridgeport, we hit snow at Brewston Mills, totally unexpected on April Fool's Day. And thankfully, in our four-wheel drive vehicle, we were able to traverse through, but it snowed all the way up to the near side of Sidling Hill, and made for a very strange trip home on April Fool's. And then we got home and found out both Matt, myself, and cameraman John Alderton had COVID. We tested positive within a few days after that. So
I remember
it was an April Fool's Day to forget.
I can remember that one clearly, yes. This day, 1789, in New York City, the United States House of Representatives achieved its first quorum, and they elect Frederick Muhlenberg of Pennsylvania as their first speaker. I think this is one of those things where if they had thought this one out better, the House of Representatives wouldn't have convened for the first time ever on April Fool's Day, Bill.
And they elected someone who is past in history nobody's ever heard of.
You have now.
I have now.
Jay Paterno seemed a little bit nervous when I said, hey, you don't remember me, but I remember you. It's like, oh, West Virginia, what happened? What'd I do? Yeah, it wasn't bad. Our guest in this segment is Seth DiStefano. He is the Policy Outreach Director for the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. Seth, good morning once again to you, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Rob. I'm doing well.
We are just about at the end of this House of Delegates Senate session here, the legislative session. What do they have? About a dozen days left, Seth?
Yep, April 12th will be day 60. So, yeah, almost exactly 12 days left.
Also, okay, very good. Now, before we get to our subject matter at hand, in general, overall, many people regard this session as I don't want to say a do-nothing session, but a session in which not a whole lot has been accomplished. Do you agree with that in general as an overall overview of it?
Yeah, you're going to get me in trouble. As I hang up this phone, I'm going to have to actually head down to the Capitol, so I'm reluctant to say it's a do-nothing session.
Oh, they don't listen to this show, don't worry.
Yeah, but I think that the governor's approach to his agenda definitely could use some work. He's probably going to have to think about like how he treats people or how he goes about wanting to enact his agenda. A lot of things that he has wanted have gone down in flames, pretty spectacularly, I would say. And in general, I think a lot of time, especially on the front end of the session, has been dedicated to things that I think most West Virginians just don't. I wouldn't say that there's not a lot of kitchen table issues at the session this year. Just put it that way. Yeah.
So this is I don't know, maybe the half a dozen times I've heard this reference to Governor Morrissey's methods for talking to people, dealing with people and such. Can you elaborate on that more?
I mean, I think it's, the words I have heard are kind of heavy-handed, especially, in the beginning of the session with, a couple of his bigger items, kind of, trying to push people around, especially in the House of Delegates, which does not go very well. I would say probably 75% of the people's House are generally not willing to kind of be pushed around by anybody. So, that's about the best I can summarize it for you.
Oh, fair enough.
Seth, Bill Stubblefield, you mentioned the House of Delegates. There was another change this past year, and Roger Hanshaw, the Speaker, emphasized quality over quantity. Have you seen some impact of that change of the way the House does business?
I think the new committee structure has both pluses and minuses. A lot of it still kind of depends on the chair of, which of the major committees you're dealing with. I do think, for instance, the Health Committee, in the House had pretty robust public input. They'll have, meetings and hearings that'll go on for several hours while people will get their say in. Yesterday, in the Finance Committee, people were permitted to speak to the budget that the House presented. So I think that, there are, and that being said, Bill, I also think that they're still kind of working out some of the kinks in the process, to be honest with you, which I think is fair, given that it's the first year they've rolled this out.
But all in all, you think you're at least neutral on it or slightly positive? Is that fair? I think as time goes forward, it could be a net positive, to be honest with you. I think that there are some things that do still need to be worked out when it comes to the public's ability to weigh in on legislation. That was the whole point of what Speaker Hanshaw wanted to accomplish with the new structure. Was, in fact, it's really about the quality of the bills and not necessarily the number of bills you pass in a session. And I would absolutely agree with him on that note. But also, they did away with the public hearing process, right? It used to be in the House, anyone could request a public hearing on a bill. And they did away with that this year. And what they substituted instead was a process where committees are to hold hearings on bills when they are first presented to committee. And that has been a little inconsistent, to be 100% honest with you. Some chairs just really don't care about it. And some chairs do a good job. But, I think that there's definitely some room for improvement there.
Let's get into some specifics now, Seth, in regards to your appearance here today, and talk about West Virginia's working poor and Medicaid and SNAP benefits. You have some concerns.
Well, I think that, given Governor Morrisey and Secretary Kennedy's appearance in Martinsburg, I believe it was last Friday, that folks in the Eastern Panhandle and honestly folks in any border county need to take notice. And here's the reason why. In Berkeley County, in any given year, there's about $30 million in SNAP benefits dispersed. And if West Virginia decides to go it alone in restricting what SNAP participants can purchase, we are going to see, I predict, kind of an exodus of people to do their grocery shopping in neighboring states. And that will have serious consequences economically for the region.
Give me an example of some of the changes that you think are coming that would cause people to do that.
Yeah, so Governor Morrisey has stated that West Virginia will be the first state to seek a waiver from the federal government to restrict purchases of soda, Pepsi, whatever that, with SNAP benefits. And while this, might seem on its face like an issue that might support public health, I would argue that the consequences economically, when folks, basically decide that they're just going to do their grocery shopping somewhere else, in a place like Berkeley County where you can literally throw a baseball and hit two neighboring states, that's going to levy some pretty serious consequences for like the grocery store environment in the region.
Do you have any data to back that up, or is this suspicion right now?
I think that this is just my a well-founded hunch, we should say, on my behalf. And it wouldn't be everywhere, right? But where consumers and where SNAP clients have the ability to just go to Virginia or go to Maryland or go to Pennsylvania, I think that they're going to. Purchases of quote unquote soda and or junk food or candy are very, very small in comparison to the rest of things that SNAP clients purchase with their SNAP dollars. And what's going to end up happening is people are just not going to really put up with being kind of pushed around and spoken down to, I think, in this way. And they're going to take those federal food assistance dollars and go to neighboring states. And we do have experience. We know what happens when West Virginia makes policy choices to restrict SNAP dollars. The long story short of it, Rob, is that grocery stores end up closing their doors, right? Because those federal food assistance dollars, they don't just support families or veterans or persons with disabilities who are our neighbors who struggle with hunger. They literally keep grocery stores open in West Virginia for everybody. And this is a real concern. I really want to sound the alarm for folks in the Eastern Panhandle to reach out to the governor and really strongly encourage him to reconsider this decision of his.
Is there go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just going to say, Seth, as you mentioned, it's kind of a small amount of the SNAP benefits that really are going to a family maybe purchasing soft drinks or candies or things like that. Do you really think that they would make that transition to go somewhere else for such a small amount of purchase as opposed to picking up additional juice items or other things than sodas and candy?
I do. I think that, where families have the opportunity. Again, this isn't going to be everywhere. In the bordering counties that border, our 5 neighboring states, there's about $300 million in SNAP benefits dispersed on an annual basis. I don't think it's going to be as severe in certain counties, right? I don't know that, like in Mingo County, you would see the same exodus of people like you would possibly in like northern Jefferson County or Berkeley County, for instance. But I do think that families, especially when you're talking about something as tone deaf as what the governor has proposed, really, poor people don't always get the opportunity to fight back when public policy singles them out. In this case, I really think they will, because to my understanding, none of our neighboring states are considering this particular move. And so what I think that there is a high likelihood that, for instance, maybe not all 30 million of those SNAP dollars end up leaving Berkeley County. But what happens if 50% end up just going right over the border to Virginia or Maryland? The results really could be catastrophic.
I have read that the bill would still need to have a federal waiver, basically, to restrict these purchases. The Department of Human Services would have to seek that. Do you know much about that? Is that something that you think the federal government would waive or not?
So, outstanding question. Thank you for asking. It's technically the United States Department of Agriculture would have to submit the waiver, or would have to approve the waiver, for instance. And there are some complexities to that. Only one state in the past has tried this, the state of Maine, and they were rejected a couple years back. We don't really know what Secretary Rawlins, who is the Secretary of Agriculture with the Trump administration, would do in this particular case. But it's not solely within Secretary Kennedy's power just to grant this waiver. This does have to, because SNAP is a function of the United States Department of Agriculture. It would have to go through them first.
Seth, of a given family that uses food stamps or the SNAP program, roughly what % of their food budget is covered by SNAP?
It depends. Some families, I think it's roughly in the neighborhood of 70+% live below the poverty line. That's the federal poverty line. And, for those families that federal food assistance represents a pretty significant part of their food budget. Other families, live below like half of the poverty line, are very, very, very poor. And, for some of those folks, it generally is pretty much their entire food budget.
Okay. Well, I was coming back to your point, your surmise that everybody's going to leave the county to go across the state line. And if there was 100% of the food budget, that might be the case. If it's, say, 75%, I suspect those folks would spend 75% on the regular food and then 25% out of their own pocket to buy the Cokes or candy. But I'm guessing.
No. You make a good point, Bill. It is quote unquote the supplemental nutrition assistance program, right? For there is a significant percentage of folks that SNAP doesn't represent their entire food budget, and people are free to buy other things with their own money. But I don't know. Philosophically, if I can just kind of riff on this for a second, I really don't have a problem, just personally, if a kid brings home an A on a math test, and their mom wants to be able to get them a candy bar as a reward if they use their SNAP card. I really don't have a problem with that, to be honest with you. And I think it really misses the mark if we're talking about health. And we know that West Virginia has some of the worst health outcomes in the entire country. This is not a big secret. But when folks in, broad swaths of the state, entire counties can't trust the water that's coming out of their kitchen faucet on a regular basis. Is soda really the problem? I don't think it is, to be honest with you. And I really feel like Governor Morrissey has missed the mark on this one, especially when there are so many other things that he could be focusing on to improve access to healthy foods, right? It's not that poor folks don't want to eat healthy. It's that, number one, they either live in a food desert, of which we have plenty in West Virginia, right? Or they just can't afford fruits and vegetables and other healthier items. It is not cheap to eat healthy, right? I mean, like it is cost prohibitive for folks to have access to higher quality foods.
Yeah, Seth, over the years, I've heard a lot of complaining about what people buy with at one point, their food stamps. Now it's SNAP benefits. And it seems like you can't win either way. And I'll give you an example of two of the different complaints I've heard. Somebody who's in the line and they see somebody with SNAP benefits paying for sodas, candy bars, chips, junk food, right? And then I've also heard the complaint, standing in a line, this person's paying for their steak with SNAP benefits. So I don't know that you can win either way if you're paying with SNAP benefits, but because someone's going to watch what you're paying, what you're buying, and say, that's my tax dollars. I can't afford to eat steak, but they can. Or why are they buying junk food? Well, you get my drift there. Was part of this also a list of here's the food you can buy, we'll pay for, here's the food you can't that we won't pay for? Is there a specific list that's included with this possible directive?
That's a good question. I mean, like, a lot of this is going to have to get sorted out in, like, the complexity of the waiver request. As far as, like, the public announcement, I think all I heard was soda pop. But who really knows, like, what that actually means? Does that mean, like, flavored seltzer water that, doesn't have any calories, that might be on sale, buy one, get one free? Or does that mean diet soda? Or, there are a lot of unanswered questions here. For instance, there was a bill down here this session that was similar in nature. But when we dug into the definitions of like what soda and candy really are in state code, things like granola bars would have been banned. So there are a lot of different ways this can go awry when it comes down to like the nuts and bolts of how a waiver like this is submitted to the United States Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, it can get convoluted because what's healthy and what's not healthy is, I guess, the question is.
The definition in the bill is fairly clear, I think. Soft drinks, for example, do not include beverages which contain milk or milk products, soy, rice, or similar milk substitutes, or greater than 50% vegetable or fruit juice by volume. So that eliminates a lot of things from the definition of soft drinks.
Well, it's a lot of label reading for ingredient percentages too, and I don't know who enforces that. Because there's everything's self-check now, so I don't know how does that get implemented as a. When's the last time you went to a cashier at a supermarket?
Yeah,
right?
but with our technology today, that can be flagged very easily. That's probably not the idea is not the identification is not the problem in this case.
Well, is it going to cost more to implement that than it will be than we're saving on sodas? I don't know.
I don't know either.
I salute any opportunities for people to get healthier. I do, honestly. I can understand that. Let's get away from this for a moment, Seth, and get more toward Medicaid, because now there's starting to be some conversation in the legislature about what will happen in West Virginia after there are Medicaid cuts that take place. I don't know how serious it is because nobody knows the real amounts yet, but what are you hearing down there?
Well, yesterday thankfully, a bill died that would have triggered the end of the Medicaid expansion if there were cuts on the federal level. That bill 3518 was originated out of thin air in the House Finance Committee last week. And was placed on the inactive calendar yesterday by Speaker Hanshaw, thankfully. I can't reinforce just how important Medicaid is for West Virginia. The Medicaid expansion that was approved by then Governor Earl Ray Tomblin has been a real, not just a lifeline for just individuals. 165,000 people have their health insurance through the Medicaid expansion in West Virginia. It's also just been like the only positive economic news over the last 10 years. When you look at job growth or lack thereof in West Virginia over the last decade, healthcare is really the only place where West Virginia has seen job increases. And that comes back to these federal healthcare dollars that support hospitals, they support nurses, they support community healthcare clinics, they support, the ability of folks to get into, rehab services and things like that. So, I really hope that, Congressman Riley Moore, Senators Capito and Justice are approaching this particular issue with a great deal of caution, because it's not just the health care for individuals, which is very important, right? It sucks when you can't go to the doctor when you need to, right? Not much fun. But it's also, an economic lifeline for West Virginia. So really any cuts to Medicaid would be very, very bad.
Yeah, Seth, going back to this trigger bill, House Bill 3518, which you said the Speaker put on hold yesterday. What was the rationale for even introducing this bill?
I think that one of the co-sponsors, Delegate Matt Rohrbach from Cabell County, said he really wanted to get the attention of the federal government and let them know kind of what the stakes were if they tried to cut the federal matching funds that West Virginia receives for Medicaid, specifically within this particular population of folks. Medicaid generally. For every dollar West Virginia puts in, we get $3 back from the feds. For the expansion population, for every dollar we put in, we get $9 back. It's a pretty good deal. And so I think that at least in his public comments, Delegate Rohrbach has said that he wanted to make sure that the federal government understood the stakes, that if they dialed back their support of the expansion population, that West Virginia would have to make some very, very tough decisions.
Well, on the surface, that sounds reasonable, but why was a pushback? Why was a blowback? And there was a considerable amount against this bill.
Well, I mean, we're talking about health care for 165,000 people. These people, Medicaid expansion goes up to 138% of the federal poverty line. A lot of these folks are, working folks. They just, they have jobs that maybe just don't pay that much. And there really is a considerable amount of healthcare infrastructure in West Virginia that really only exists because of the expansion, right? Right here in Kanawha County, I get my care through a health system called Cabin Creek, and they were able to open more clinics in Kanawha County after the healthcare expansion. So, not only do you have people whose health insurance relies on the expansion, calling in and saying, hey, what on earth are you doing? You also have a lot of people who work in healthcare who understand how important Medicaid expansion is, reaching out to their lawmakers and raising Cain about this.
Yeah, I understand that, but I don't think Rohrbach or the House bill was suggesting to take it away. It was just raising the probability of the impact if it was taken away.
Well, the bill, if the way it was structured, is that if the federal match was reduced by a penny, right? So not even if it was reduced at all from a 9-to-1 to $8.99 to 1, then everybody in the expansion loses health care. So it was a pretty drastic trigger bill. And I think that kind of drove some of the backlash towards it.
Seth, thanks much for your time this morning. I appreciate it, sir.
Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Seth.
Yep.
Seth DiStefano, Policy Outreach Coordinator for the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy.